the course of pursuing AcI work in
Mm,
India, particularly in southern India, has had in your career?
right. Um, so I came to AcI as part at the end of my master's program in product design at IIT Bombay, where I was pursuing it. In fact, after there's no specific stream of interaction design or AcI back then offering a specialized master's program in India in 2005 to 7. It started after in 2008. 2007 it started when I was already in my second year. But then soon after I'd finished my master's, I joined Anita Joshi as a research assistant to work on one of the projects that looked at low literacy people and their usage of the keypad, the feature phones back then, and in particular looking at the phone book application. And that was my introduction in many ways to the practice of interaction design, HCI research. That is actually very located in the practices of global south, where understanding people and their practices was enmeshed totally with the idea of design. Um, because you cannot design otherwise, without understanding intimately. So that kind of got me into this field. Then when I went to do my PhD, I think I got reintroduced to the design aspects. So with HCI, um, there there's this kind of where do each of these disciplines sit in is always a question. It is evolving and settling down in some ways, but the kind of HCI that I got to practice with the Joshi was in between the sort of more ethnographic driven, but also more at the same time it was aspiring to be rigorous in the sense of a positivist work, where there's a certain kind of testing, certain kind of validation that was considered to be rigorous in terms of numbers, in terms of quantity, or at least a study that is bringing in qualitative as well as. So this kind of usability testing in the wild kind of a frame. But when I went to do my PhD, I got reintroduced to this idea of design itself as a valid approach to construct knowledge and to share and contribute knowledge in interaction design. So it shifted a bit from HCI as such to more interaction design and a little bit of participatory design, but definitely more exploratory, experimentative interaction design as such. And I was, yeah, the PhD in Denmark is for 3 years, but then I took 4 years as such. And it was driven by very kind of unique in the sense that there were 5 explorations, and each one was situated with one household of senior citizens, 2 in Denmark and 4 in India. So I engaged largely with 6 households, and with each one, we kind of sketched and designed some interactive prototypes and mockups and over a period. So that kind of it kind of opened me up to this idea of more the kind of creative design to largely put, or interaction design. But also during that time, I think I was interested in participatory design. So I engaged with parallelly with some projects that talk about participatory design, the Danish Design School, and this idea of infrastructuring, which is a Scandinavian perspective, was quite inspiring back then. So then when I came back to India in 2012, because of kind of family reasons, my father wasn't well. It was the last stage of his cancer, and he passed away in November 2012. So I kind of then happened to, I wasn't sure of what kind of career I was looking for. And I knocked on doors of quite few research labs here, Microsoft India, Xerox, and all that. But then I found a position at Shishti Labs, which is a lab situated at an art and design school, which is mostly doing commercial user research kind of work. but it felt interesting to see this bit between academics and of a traditional art and design, not traditional in that sense, but it was quite fun, or more sort of European art and design school set in India, in the sense that it was more boutique, more experimentative, and not set in the mold of the NID, which is typically how Indian design schools are. And this idea of engaging with the industry through research. And then, but I was quite given a lot of freedom to explore and get more funding and establish a research program and that sort of thing. But soon it became very clear to me that funding for research in India, especially if you're a private institution, was very tricky to come by. Um, and we wrote a lot of funding applications, tried to collaborate, but nothing would come by. Also because, of course, our approach was quite. So the only funding seemed to be available was around in like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or that kind of more implementation or testing kind of spaces. Nothing really to explore and investigate and early kind of thing, or it was public health grants and stuff like that. So we never fit in anywhere initially. Um, so that period was quite challenging in that sense, that it was like, a lot of, but then I kept going because I just finished my PhD in and there was a lot of stuff to sit with my PhD and publish those. So there was the publications was coming through, at least a couple of them every year, within AcI spaces, along with my supervisor. And I started experimenting in teaching, doing some studios and seeing if we can convert those studio into some kind of publication with students, which kept on happening at the context of India AcI conference series or Asia Pacific AcI series. So that was quite, and that was also the time in 2015-16 when I got pulled into, and happily, so to build humans. I mean, they call us human-centered design program at Srishti, but mostly interaction design programs at the master's and bachelor's level. And to kind of see how Srishti's pedagogy, as well as this kind of approach to design with technology can come together. So then I could bring together my IDC experience, also my idea of or the experience of using design as a way to be more exploratory, more material, experimentative with materials together in this kind of curriculum. And I worked with a set of younger folks who have mostly finished their masters and as such. But somewhere around 2016, then I got in touch with a not-for-profit through connections, and it's Maya, and it's an organization based out of Bangalore, and they work with they've been training and setting up a group of women health workers in a nearby town to do door-to-door services and this kind of a third layer of healthcare infrastructure, where they do earn an income from the communities by doing some kind of testing and keeping records. So they're not supported by the government, but also they're very affordable, and they have a public health agenda. It's not just to make money, and their livelihood is like they earn an income of doing these tests for about 5,000 rupees per month, and they're all women. So then I started engaging with them, and early on the idea was to equip them with design thinking skills, because they were there's this framed as micro entrepreneurs. And then that's when I could draw upon my experiences of participatory design. We did the project there, and a lot of learning happened about how design as we see it and design thinking as we see it, even if it's participatory, is not necessarily what is valued by somebody like who's in the frontline health work, where creative thinking has to be on their feet and very nimble and very short time loops. But then this idea of engaging with them through long term is something that started developing, and it just kept happening for various reasons. And I had students to intern, and I'm mentoring them to develop some sort of educational materials for them to talk to their community and clients, and certain idea of app that emerged, and we tried to prototype, which didn't go anywhere again. So this trying to still figure out what kind of technology would be interesting for the work that they're doing was always and then there was always this back and forth, and the relationship that we maintained over time. And so it became a site for, if nothing else, it became definitely a site for me to take my students to learn together. And return, the health navigators got some design work done with my students being there. So we kept that going without any funding support as such. And then at the same time, I've been attending conferences and networking as much as Sister was very good support that back then. They did fund me my travels for 2 conferences a year and stuff like that. Um, and um, and then I could manage to foster a network that was European, particularly with Nervo, who's a close collaborator now, who's at Cardiff, who's also from Ecuador and then did his PhD in Denmark. And we had supervisors who were kind of close and all that. And then the common area of health was something that we were interested in, but also global south was something was very predominant in our concerns, because he's coming from South America and I'm from India. And then he moved to a position in UK at the same time. So then we started looking for UK. Interestingly had, and now it is lessened, but there are a lot of interesting proposals that they were seeking to look at in the global health perspective. So what can research do in the global health? And we found a grant finally that we, again, it was not necessarily design specific, interestingly. It was mostly either AHRC, which is Art and Humanities, or MRC, Medical Research. So it was, we had to find the sweet spot. And finally, there was one call which was kind of made for us, which is this combination of AHRC and MRC. And then I was fortunate to have Maya as a collaborator. So we proposed and we got a small grant, like a 9-month grant, to do early scoping and participatory exploration around what are the pregnancy care experiences of rural women in interaction with the infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure. And that was situated in Chenpatna with the Maya health workers. So then we got some money, we could get research assistants, and there was a whole team from UK traveling to be part of this. And I got a chance to design and carry out a research project in a more academic sense for the first time in India. And that was quite a lot of learning. But we also were actively looking at the site and the health workers, not as informants, but as core research collaborators. So they were involved even to see what kind of, how do we recruit, whom to recruit, what kind of parameters, as well as what kind of concerns to be focusing on, what should the research focus on. And they were also part of the research team where we did some interesting experimentation on methods, which is a paper yet to be written. um, and this was 2018, 19. So that yet is quite loaded. But it is, yeah. So then we did publish quite a bit of interesting papers from that. I think 3. And then subsequently, Nervo moved to Cardiff. We got some more money internally from these universities, and we did one more scoping study in Udaipur. There's one more collaborator that I found very closely, and she's very inspirational. She's a designer, and her name is Lakshmi Murthy, and I'll share these links with you. And she's for 30 years now, she's been working with a not-for-profit, and she's part of the not-for-profit in Udaipur doing menstrual health education and sexual and reproductive health education, and doing a lot of design work, and training sessions and in the rural parts of Rajasthan and Udaipur. And she had visiting Srishti, and we started talking, and I started, kind of loved her perspectives. And for me, coming from this idea of engaging with rural communities in the intersection of design and technology, it was quite refreshing to see her approach. And this idea of slowing down and embedding oneself and finding ways to be in community with, and rather than just helicoptering in and out, was something that was shaped by our conversation. I did also kind of pedagogical experiments with her over 3 years, and we had to pause it because of pandemic, where for 2 weeks I used to take my students, postgraduate students, and her rural and tribal adolescents, and we used to do a residential workshop we kind of appropriated this idea of design hackathon and all, of making sessions, but it was framed as design workshop for the rural adolescents, and it was for my students, it was about how do we understand bodies. So it became understanding bodies and menstrual hygiene and sexual and reproductive, but through design work, but also understanding what does it mean to think of technologies when the people that we are thinking with have not, for example, have not used a flush, a toilet that can flush, right, ever in life. They've mostly been, so those kind of things we did some, and again, that is something that I've been trying to write up with Lakshmi, but we both. One thing that I wanted to say is when you're embedded in grassroots kind of work of change making, which is now I'm explicitly getting more involved in, it's so hard to find time to write academically. But it's not just about time, it's also about motivation. Slowly, my own motivations of writing this is slipping by. The only motivation is now Shristi has come under this more kind of a traditional private university of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, which is prioritizing research publication as one of the way for career growth. And they're incentivizing, as any private university in India, they're incentivizing publication with cash incentives, like gig work. So for me now, that is a motivation, and it has not been applied to my design school. They're still negotiating that, but for me, I mean, I'm still writing papers but it's been slower. But the motivation is mostly to gain currency to get more funding to do the work that we're doing. I mean, of course, there's a lot for us to share about knowledge, but we're realizing that academic publication is not the only way. There could be other ways to engage with and share the knowledge that we are generating, but it's not just my knowledge as a researcher. It's a collective knowledge, because right now the Chenpatna relationship is getting more formalized. Of course, I became a board member of Maya, but the health workers themselves and I and some of us, we started a design collective called as Design Beku, and we are now formalizing, in the process of formalizing a collective of 12 health workers and us as a prototype organization, which explicitly looks at and that's the work that we have been doing since just after the pandemic in 2021. I mean, not after the pandemic, but just after the waves went off, second wave went off, to look at traditional and local health knowledge and archiving that work, and thinking of it as a library that could be used by and for the communities, and it is built by community with the framing of community-owned knowledge infrastructure. So we also built a community network, and we moved. So my work started moving towards more what is known as implementation work, largely, but because those were the grants that we got, but more sort of activist implementation grant from association APC and Numun Fund got us. We got a feminist grant for 2 years to sustain this work. And it is not necessarily somehow working through the grant making has moved more towards getting things on ground and building these infrastructures. And hopefully the idea also is to these places become places of research, but with the community members. So we are in community, at least at a smaller scale, the 10 and 12 health workers and us are in community with each other. So that's the kind of relationship and work relationship that is evolving for me. And of course, I also have some close collaborators internationally, Nervo and this Melissa Densmore at the University of Cape Town. And we share this idea of community-owned infrastructure, community-owned knowledge creation, content creation, as something that is of a common ground. So Melissa has a group of people, and they have been working with a community network in Ocean View community in Cape Town. And so this becomes two sites. And yeah, so we've been trying to stuff around that. Yeah.
It's fabulous. It's so inspiring just to hear you share all of these like different projects and the journey that you've taken. And I have a few questions to follow up, and I'll begin from the beginning of the more personal side of it. I'm so sorry for your loss, and the decisions that you had to take to kind of be there for your family.
Yeah.
And it's a decision that oftentimes when researchers are based in the West, researchers from global South, or from other locations, have to make. And like, I know this is more personal on the side than what we've discussed, but it, like, we bring our whole person to our research
Yes,
experience
very
and the
true. Very
research
true.
journey. And so I want to kind of start from there, if you don't mind, to kind of
Sure.
ask you, was it difficult for you to make a decision then, when you were finishing your PhD, to decide to uproot yourself from, like, your PhD, completing your
Yeah.
PhD in Denmark, to come
Yeah.
to India, where there was lots of uncertainty, particularly
Yeah.
around your career?
Yeah. It was, I think, more, yeah, it was a bit challenging decision, but there were some things that eased up the decision making process. So my plan was to always to come back in many ways, but to explore. I was very interested to explore what what does the postdoc world look like, because I wasn't sure that the reason for me going into do my PhD was not necessarily pursuing an academic career. I was at the intersection between, I worked in industry in India, and that's not the kind of work I wanted to do. But I wanted to be in this kind of grassroots technology design and development. And the early 2000 to late 2000 in India was very rich with that. Every corporate was doing some lot of exciting work, IBM to like Microsoft. They was doing a lot of exciting, and I wanted to be part of it. And I realized that PhD may give me that gateway into that. So, but I was interested to kind of do a couple of years of postdoc. And even in Denmark, when the one, as part of PhD, there's a research exchange component where you can go to any place in the world funded to do research. But and so I started my PhD in 2009, and 2000, end of 2010, January 2011, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So then I moved the research exchange to India to be closer to my father as he was going through his chemo. So and I could manage to do research even, as well as trying to help out the first round of chemos and stuff like that. But also I'm the kind of, I'm the eldest son. I had younger brother, and he was still figuring ground. He was just still finishing up his bachelor's studies then. So there was this kind of expectation that I mean, it was not never stated, but there was an expectation that I'm around in many different ways to help them. Good thing was, it was never a financial trouble for my parents. My father was still working, and there's this whole sort of his security net was strong enough to hold financially. But
Mm,
but when in 2012, I was due to submit in April, but when in January 2012 it kind of came back, the cancer, then it became clear to me that I need to, and this time, and the second time it came back more vigorously. So then
mm.
I was like, okay, I need to head back now. So I wrote a rambling thesis in a month's time, month and a half. And and then I came back to India, and then I just let the institute decide what to do with that. But of course,
Mm.
the reviewers were very kind enough. The committee that we put together was very kind. They read through that all rambling thesis, and they gave me a 6 months extension to rewrite it with deep comments of what to be rewritten. And but then I had to and the other thing is, my wife had already moved to India. She was in Copenhagen with me briefly for a year, but she's an architect and she loves to work and get paid for her work. And Copenhagen, and she had a master's from Domus in Italy, but then Copenhagen didn't really entertain her as a paid work. There was gigs here and there, but all for free. So she decided to come back, and but she's from Delhi, and I, like, my parents from Bangalore. So she moved to Delhi, and she's working there. So that was, so it became, for me, what was the thing was, I didn't want to live with the regret that I I stayed away.
Mm.
That was one thing that was very clear. And I came with an intention not to stay back, just to kind of see where this will take me. Because I still hadn't clear idea of what kind of career I'm looking at. where I'll go. So this was supposed to be temporary as such, because it was very clear that he's going to pass on by the time I came in. Yeah, I came back in May, June, and then we had to figure out a place in Bangalore, because they're from small town nearby, like 4 hours from here, and then it was help and do the kind of palliative care and all that.
Mm,
And I'm very happy that I came when I came back, because those were the days where my mother was the weakest, and she's been holding it for so long, but then she needed a lot of support. So what is then called as the end of life phase of last couple of months, when his body completely deteriorated. And for me also, that was the time when I was writing my thesis, the revised thesis. And so the writing actually helped me to kind of maintain a bit of a distance from what was happening in the home and all that. um, I submitted the thesis in September, mid-September, and then I luckily also got a job by then at Srishti, and they were very happy to have me, and they also gave me a fully paid leave till end of November because of my father's illness. And that's something that I can never kind of, I mean, so it was a very warm institution led by one person, Dr. Geeta Naran, like passionate woman. Now she's 70 and she's retired and moved on, and now we could become a corporate university. But back then that place was something else. So this whole sort of ecosystem that enabled and cushioned my decision, it was
mm,
there. It helped me. And then in December, when I went back and I defended my thesis, and yeah, by then my father had already passed on. He passed on November 3rd. And then it was then focus of getting my mother up and stabilize. She was very clear she will not stay in Bangalore. She has a home there, and but to support her, it took 3 years of back and forth. And then my brother then finally also got whatever his masters, and he followed the same track and went to Norway for his PhD and all that. So um, now at the same time, then I started being embedded more in these contexts, in these places, and then now
mm,
work has gotten way more interesting.
mm,
I can now feel that this is exciting. And now it doesn't make sense for me to move back anywhere else. This is where it is now.
mm,
It should start bearing fruit in terms of what is emerging, right? Yeah.
mm. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I'm so sorry for your loss, but also it's
Learn.
admirable strength that you demonstrated that, I can't imagine the decision and the challenges you faced. It also kind of does not skip me that you mentioned multiple times, and it's clear that there was care that you experienced in multiple phases, right? With the people examining your thesis report, as well as care here with
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
with the with Gita Narayanan, as well
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And that's something that's worth kind of cherishing, I guess.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when
Very true. Very true.
in academia, we're in this cutthroat sort of you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
push, but there is care, right? People care
True.
and
True.
care
True.
about us as a whole human being.
True.
and
Very true.
and in your story, I hear that a lot. And I'm related to this. I want to kind of digress a little bit to kind of talk about one prominent thing that I noted down as you were sharing your journey, which was around relationship building. It was more prominent than what we would typically hear when we talk about research or AcI work. And I wonder if I could ask you a little bit to kind of share more in more elaborate terms
Yeah.
and in elaborate ways in ways that you think relationship maintenance, relationship building
Yeah.
is part of your research, to what extent it is,
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
important you think it
Yeah.
is.
That's so. Yeah, I think I'll. So, as part of Srishti, I started, these collaborations, conversations, corridor conversations, friendships. Now has come to a very interesting set of 4 or 5 of us. Some of them, like Padmini, I'm just going to take names because they're very close friends. Padmini Remure, who started Design Beku, who left academia, and she's a digital humanist, and she started Design Beku. full-time, and Shreyas and Paul, all coming from different disciplinary backgrounds, and I, who's still at Shristi, but we contribute our time to this collective of Design Beku. So for us, our practice evolved through conversing with each other. This kind of research, and the distinction that I imbibed about research versus teaching, that was very European. People complaining about teaching load so that they don't get time to research, and all these distinctions were getting very wonderfully blurred here. And so this idea of design practice, creative practice, and research is also getting blurred. And these evolved through conversation with my close set of friends, whom now we are part of it. One of the things that we have theorized in a paper that we wrote, but managed to write and publish, is this idea of in between. So when we are working with grassroots organizations over a period of time, Shreyas, for example, is working in the northern Karnataka, Hyderabad, Karnataka region, which is termed as the one of the most underdeveloped districts, as Bidar, Gulbarga area, and he's for almost 10 years now. So and I have the practice in Chenpatna about 6-7 years. So this idea of in between is where is the idea of maintaining relationships when there's no funding, when the project has run out, when there's no project. So that's the in between, and that in between is a lot of work done by everyone with the underlying motivation that what we did and worked together and what we work and converse together is of value for everyone concerned. So there's a lot of that in between, which is clearly can be theorized as maintenance work and care work that is performed by different sort of individuals within the relationship to maintain that relationship. I think this is quite becomes apparent when the collaborators are all mostly academic, right? So as I was saying, Nervo and Melissa, we are friends too. In different ways, we're all academics, some more and some like me less. But there is a set precedence of doing this. There is conferences, there are publications, there are grants, there's student exchange. There's a frame to build and maintain these relationships. But when it comes to an academic activist and a community, it's something that every person who's done this work over time has their own learnings, have their own ways of doing this. And I think that's worth looking at. And for us, that relationship, it's very pragmatic. It's not just an academic need to theorize, because if we don't do that, then there's no field, there's no community to work with. And the reason why things are exciting now for us is because the vision of a community-owned infrastructure, a Chenpatna Health Library now is evolved to be truly co-owned. It's not that we're getting money to tell them what to do, and they're delivering it and working with that. It's something that they are interested in. We are defining roles also, because they're not necessarily interested in kind of getting the networks in place or troubleshooting the server issues, but they're definitely interested in experimenting how they can use the server, how they can think of more services that they can offer with it. So there is a more clearer role. Not everybody is doing everything, but there is a common stake in that infrastructure that is evolving. And that can only happen because we have been working with each other, maintaining these relationships, and putting in care in many ways through this time, whether we had funds or we didn't have funds, right?
Yeah.
So that has come to be very crucial for us. Yeah.
And I wonder, like, the skeptic in me wants to ask around, to what extent do you think like scholars, especially in academia, right, understand this kind of like care work or maintenance relationship, or what you call in between? I know you mentioned Melissa and Nervo, whose work is very admirable, but aside from some like small group of people, to what extent do you think like the general AcI population, the scholar population, understands this kind of effort or sort of like articulation work, right? Like the work before
Yeah.
the work after the work.
I think it's a bit under theorized, or and which means that there is not so much of traction. Nicola Bidwell talks a lot about this, and she's another researcher that I'm hugely inspired from, especially because she's working with community and community networks, and she has this, and I totally agree with this about this publication cycle and grant making cycle in academic and even activism is in stark opposition to how a builds and owns a network and uses it. A
Mm,
community doing that is an immense effort that takes years, whereas grant cycles are 1 year, 2 years.
mm,
Research cycles are even lesser. So there's always a conflict of researchers wanting to get the results out and publishing, or wanting to get the implementation and measurement of impact within 2 years and stuff like that. And
mm,
she talks about this and how oftentimes she had to not write or publish research because it was not something that the community would benefit from, and which meant for her, who and she is, as I understand, and I'm talking for her, which I shouldn't, but this is my interpretation. She is part of the academic career in more closer ways than I have the liberty to not be. Um, because of Srishti, I had fortunate to be in Srishti. So that has affected how her career has progressed,
mm,
because of what is seen as lack of publication is actually rich in practice. So there is
mm,
this binaries that a larger academic world, um, and that is driven from, I guess, Western intellectual traditions that pervades even global South. Research
mm,
versus teaching, or creative practice and change making versus publications and stuff like that. And that, I think, is something that has to be discussed more in AcI, which means that we need to really look into how we do research and what we think of research and what impact is it making. And that comes for a hard questioning, right?
yeah.
So, yeah. So, for example, and I have this question for a lot of academic work that are situated in Global South, whether it's done by Global South researchers in India or HCI work, or people from any other universities which have the funding mechanisms. How much of that research has actually contributed to any change of policy making in India,
Mm,
for example, or any change even in education, design education?
mm,
Yes, like some people who are pushing that kind of approaches to education, but largely design education in India is to prepare designers to go and work in the industry. And the
mm,
industry right now is largely UI UX in the startup, you know, ecosystem, because that's where the money is.
mm,
And largely education in India is private system where they have to pay huge amount of fees, which means that they are looking for return of investment in jobs. So my understanding is that research done here in HCI is not really impacting neither at an education level of changing perspectives and how technology can be looked at, nor is it really impacting policy making,
mm,
right? For example, there's so much of technology development that is happening in India that is making people and ideas of democracy very precarious, at the government level, at a private level. But none of the HCI work is addressing that or pushing that and doing anything about it. There's a lot of interesting work in the activist space, and they're not publishing in HCI conferences. They're not,
mm,
right? So there's a lot of interesting work in flow space. Maybe Aditeshwar Seth is interesting example again that I'm inspired from, who manages this kind of academic as well as gram money and then this kind of a thing and gram money. So in that is a great example to show how research is contributing to change making on the ground. But
mm,
I'm not saying that research has to only do that. It's not like development and then putting a product in practice. No, but also one would hope that research would bring about a change at the policy level, and that's not only on the researchers, to be honest. It's also there's no mechanism set in India to do that. unlike
Mm.
like the US or the EU, where the governments fund that research to and look for feedback into their policies and invite academics to be part of policy making. India, it's with technology, it's very, yeah, it's very tricky.
It's complicated, I would say. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
in different ways, like, at least from what we hear in terms of like
yeah,
the aspirations, but also the disregard of various
yeah,
different values, especially over
yeah, yeah,
these recent
yeah.
years. I want to kind of like dive a little deeper in this on one particular aspect, which is to think about design education from somebody who's situated in India, who knows
Mm,
the system
mm,
better, and to think about like the HCI methods or the HCI approaches that are taught, or the design methods and approaches
mm,
that are taught in
mm,
colleges and schools. And like the sort of mismatch that you mentioned earlier, right? Like the
mm,
mismatch,
mm,
particularly towards it being geared all towards the
mm,
industry.
mm.
Um, how, like, what sort of alternative future do you envision, or ideal future, of course, not a dystopian one, a future do you envision where, like, a design education is suited for the context of India, for the kind of goals that you have in mind?
Yeah, I think we are actually design because we're experimenting with that thought in some ways. But I think it will be more site based. In the sense that I think my friend from bachelor's used to quote uh, uh, Abhay Bang, who is a public health researcher in Maharashtra, Gadchiroli tribal district, and him and his wife Rashmi Bang, and he had a quote about what's the research has to be done in the place where research is needed, and the sense that the knowledge production is for and within the space where it is required. So for us, this idea of learning happens and design happens in the space where um, work happens or life happens is a very close kind of ideal that we. So one kind of future that we could imagine is that there is no big institution as such. Of course, maybe they're there, but what I've learned and from being in Srishti and seeing Srishti evolve is that the larger we become, there's also a kind of a premium to access that education. There's a certain cost and certain fees and certain making it inaccessible to many.
Hmm.
So the price is the biggest challenge, as I would say, in education in design in India, because that directly links to what level of experimentation you can do in pedagogically. And without pedagogical experiments, which Srishti used to do a lot, what then becomes is a very templatized education, which can easily get molded into preparing skills for the industry, whatever
So
that
sort of
industry.
a commodification of
Right,
education.
right, exactly. So how do we resist that is to see if we can do a smaller group and more kind of lifelong learning, not necessarily go as degrees, but think of more older people or younger people coming to learn with each other and with communities that we are engaged with. In return, the communities get some material benefits of because they're teachers and they are, they need to get part of the money that comes in from
Mhm.
there. So there are these, and these are not new models at all. They're in India has been rich in alternative education, not in design. There are a lot of alternative schools who have been thriving at a very small scale. My kid goes to something called a Spooner Learning Center, and they're just 150 students. And the entire school is 200, and they've been for 20-25 years now,
Mhm.
and very beautiful stuff and very experimentative. Lot of onus given on the children to take responsibility, navigate, negotiate, articulate how they want to learn, collective decision making, community care, all that. So, and that's just one example. There's also at the university level, there's something called as I don't remember the name, but I'll find out in Rajasthan. So there are a lot of these kind of small scale experiments that have been going on for years. And the reason why they're surviving and thriving is because they're not scaled, you know.
Hmm.
That's something that
mm,
I personally believe, that we need to have more decentralized, more sort of smaller pockets where design, technology, and change making is happening without
mm,
getting into the frame of a degree or a job as such. But of course, education is always linked to livelihood and the betterment of
mm.
life. That something has to be figured out, which means that then we need to create more opportunities in alternative tech design spaces. Yeah, which is always
Mm.
a challenge because funding and all that.
Fun. Yeah, yeah. Like it comes back to like the resources or the lack of
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
which kind of
yeah.
informs
True,
a lot of the
true.
decisions we take. I
Yeah,
like when you say site-based design education, and this kind of opens up a lot of room for local adaptations, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
just the fact, like one thing that I noticed, I've lived briefly in India and noticed is that there's a lot of like primary relationship building, right? Like for example, bhaiya, like to say somebody, like you
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
address them by their name, but first by the relationship, right? Somebody's your
Right,
brother or a
right,
sister first
right,
before anything else. And so
right.
this kind of relationship building, which again was central to what you mentioned earlier, but these are local tacit knowledge of like cultural
Yeah,
practices that are stick
yeah,
so deeply in.
yeah,
So I wonder like what your thoughts are on how HCI education can be adapted, or how you've been
yeah,
adapting
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
HCI education in your
That's a very
context. Yeah.
good question. So again, as I said, I got inspired and informed by colleagues at SST, particularly Shreyas, but also Geeta has talked about what is known as place-based pedagogy, uh, a place-based research. So where the place determines how do we learn. A place determines how do we approach research, not any a priori frame, right? So I've been part of these experimentations, and Udaipur is one of my own experimentation of what the place and how the place opens up, and we work actively with the place. Place would mean people and their practices and a particular physical and social material spaces, and often it's about listening and not actively intervening and learning from them. Um, so for example, in Janpatna, when students come, they all want to get excited about what is the problem here, how are they collecting their data, why are they using paper, why not technology, can we resolve it, can we solve something, can we design some interface. That's the intent they come with already.
Mm,
But the focus is to slow them down. So the focus is to just visit and be in the field and not do anything, not do
mm,
any active methods, just be and observe and just take it all in. And then you do journaling of what did you observe, what did you feel. And initially they all start writing problems. Oh, yeah, this is a problem, what problem, this we need to. But then slowly they'll start just being there. And it is very discomforting because design education is always about trying to find problems and changing for the better, right? But just staying with there and listening to these stories, and then this shift happens about, oh, we they don't really need us.
mm,
They're the work, they're changing, they know their problems, they know what solutions. Maybe they need more resources, but they don't need us. They don't need one more interface. Maybe they
mm.
need a smartphone.
Yeah.
So that shift has been tough to manage because then what's the creative output there? So one of the things that we have been experimenting with is to invite people into the space and see what kind of creative response can you do, uh, even as design. So you are listening and you are learning from the place, but you're not restricting to be a passive learner. So is there any creative response that need not be? So we call it as support over solve, SOS. So in the sense, so one example is a master student who just graduated. She worked with she experimenting with this idea of sonic autoethnography. So sound, because the work that the health navigators do is a lot of audio recording of oral histories and episodes of going to hospital and getting a diagnosis of people, and they collect that, and we have an open source software where they upload it and annotate it and make an archive. So Ruchika, she was part of this and started listening to these, but she started recording her own experiences of what she's listening, and her own experiences of being in the field, using sounds and added sounds and voiceovers and conversations, and using that to bring back her conversations with her mother about menstrual health, because the topic was so. The output, creative output, was more of a sort of a sonic exploration, which is a site where you can listen in and you understand her experiences of being in the field. So it is not necessarily a solution, but it is interactive kind of experience for somebody to engage with it. But what it shifted, what it helped shift in the place is to started to kind of frame the work done by the health navigators in this building of this repository, but also as in itself a research work, bringing in qualitative information, uploading it, tagging it, sorting it, and trying to find patterns from 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, using audio orally, right? That is something that we are trying to foster now. But her work, being she doing this work in parallel, helped us to see that, So sometimes the implications or the kind of give and take is very serendipitous. But the learning itself is not very clear that they're not here to change things. Right. So that is, maybe that can
I absolutely adore how intermingled research and teaching is for you. Like, there was not one moment when you shared where the teaching and the research did not go hand in hand, and there's like, and it brings, like, it begs the question of, like, the question around resources, especially like you've mentioned how, collaboration with Novo enabled some resources for you to do project which you had been doing without funding beforehand, right? But the resources enable you to do more academic research or the kind of work that you further wanted to explore. And I wonder, like, the question is around the resources that, I think, not just the material resources, but in general, like the social and, like, also of the economic resources that would enable you to do the work that you think ought to be done in your context, right? What sort of resources do you think would enable that? And then, of course, like, there are lots of strengths that you already have, like Srishti support, your own pedagogical practices, which is amazingly inspiring. But if there's resources that you think would help, particularly to kind of open up spaces for collaborators like others beyond Norvo and Melissa to think about to collaborate with you in the future?
I think there's immense amount of richness in I wouldn't call it as human resources, but people who are thinking right, doing right, have amazing approaches and skills at all levels, whether it be in the community that we work with, or in community with health navigators, or even students that come to us and work with us, or other collaborators. I think the what is of course, what is challenging is definitely the funds. But what I've learned is that's not the main concern when we're doing this kind of work. We have been managed to find funds here and there, and thanks to very different kind of sources, and some of it is also our own money has gone into it, to be honest. So it's there are a lot of periods where we supported the interns. I have been supporting, and Chase has been supporting. So our own kind of. So I also see now my fixed time academic job as a way to also, one part of it goes into fostering this kind of a place of learning for us. And it's I look at it as an investment, not only for it's not investment in my career as such, but investment in this kind of a future where we want to be part of that. And it's nothing, it's just small amounts, it's not like big thing, but so money is not so critical. I mean, it is important, very important, because one thing is, no work is done as volunteer or free here in our, like, even if there's a student summer intern, there's a certain amount of money we have fixed that will go, whether it's from our pocket or any funding. It has to be. It's no free labor happens as such, unless it is learning. You're clearly a student. But I think what is tricky is management of expectations, and that's where honesty and vulnerability comes in. And I'm always wary of new people approaching me to collaborate, and in some ways it turns into having access to the site. And I don't want to be a gatekeeper, but I'm also where I feel protective, not of my space, but of protective of the concerns of what the space is and what we're building, right? Because
Mm.
uh, what experience is that there is this tendency for academic research to extract.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we are looking for now fellows, for short-term fellows for some projects that we got at Design Bay Group, with other grassroots not-for-profit communities. One person had applied, and I won't take their name, and they have amazing CV. And as part of their CV, they also mentioned that they have a research stint with somebody with Brown University. They were assisting a PhD scholar from Brown University to study maternal and child care practices in public health in this locality where we are doing this project. And they had a link, and I looked up that link, and it's a link of the PhD scholar who is a white woman. Look up their publication. They have publication on the same research area, which is child and maternal experiences in that locality. They're public health in sociology, but this person is not named as a researcher, no, not as an author. So there is that whole lot of labor that goes in building and festering and working. But there's this tendency, especially from money researchers bringing money from abroad, to treat this as a site of abstraction. And that's
Mm.
something that is the challenge of collaboration, So can you be coming to us and be vulnerable? When I
Mm.
started working with the agents, the agents, they still ask me, they still hold me, and every one of us accountable. And that's amazing. They ask me, what's in it for you, sir? Why are you doing this? What do you get out of this? So that honesty and vulnerability is, and I had to say that I'm doing this because I am interested in learning from it, and I will be publishing it
Mm.
in academic content. This is way back when I started this. So that, I think, because that's what we demand from the site. We demand honesty from them and vulnerability. And we need to be able to say that. And then be ready for them to say no, they don't want to engage with it. Because if you're doing short term, there's no benefit for them. Then we need to be ready to say, okay, you don't want to engage with us, that's fine. That
Mm.
refusal is also very important. And I personally don't want to be a mediator of these conversations, then that it becomes me as a gatekeeper in that as my side, but that's not an intent. But I'm also at the very wary of these, as Nick Bidwell talks about, is different expectations and concerns, and with the framing of the power that the funds bring in, that is not only global north to global south, but also race and caste and gender, that becomes intermingled. It is on the onus of those who are bringing in the money or the privileges to be a bit more honest and a bit more open to hopefully build longer term engagement. And if that is the intent, if the intent is to learn and be part and somehow support and longer term, that's a great thing.
Mm.
Otherwise just give us the money, give us $5,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I just
Yeah.
no, I just kind of, I think it is a great question. I think it's, for me, what I've learned is not so much as resources. We can figure out bootstrap, we can figure out, but it's just, yeah.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Like you mentioned a lot about. I think the challenge here is for, like, at least for people like me who's thinking about these kind of work, is to think about how do we balance this tension of being with the community, right?
Right,
While also being part of the academic community. You've kind of
right,
alluded to this with multiple problems around the publication cycle, but also your own lack of motivation to publish because prioritizing the community's goals means that maybe letting this Sky cycle or this CSCW cycle go away, right? And so I wonder, like, uh, if you had thought about it from your own practice and your own experience on how can something like SIGCI, right, which is the umbrella organization for AcI work, can facilitate or enable opportunity for you to share knowledge in a way that is true to yourself, true to your, you know, being with the community, embedded in the community. And what changes would you like to see in the next few years or so, or maybe in
Yeah.
the long term?
Yeah. I think there are already some very exciting stuff happening. PDC has interesting places as such, which is also very interesting. And this has pictorials
Hmm.
as a frame, because which is something that we're trying to now co-author. So all the people who have been working in this, what is the Chenpatna Health Library project, I can share some links to you later on,
Yeah. Hmm.
to give you more context of the project that I'm talking about. Is So we are wanting to make an academic contribution of our work, and including the health workers. So, but we are trying to make it as a truly co-author. It's not that we are writing and then giving them their names, but can
Hmm.
we? So pictorial is a closer, so because it's about research through images that this
Hmm.
has as a frame, and they place it equivalent to papers,
Hmm.
written papers. But it would have been amazing if we could embed audio with it, or the publication is more, because the knowledge that is there in the community and also with the agents is very oral, and
Hmm.
they always tell me, sir, you don't tell us to write or don't tell us to draw. We'll sit and talk. You do whatever with that information. You want to write, you write. You draw about it, you draw. That's what we do. They talk and I sketch and we sketch, and then we use that sketch again to talk. So I think one is the form of how do we publish research could be a bit more open to different forms of course, the rigor is still the same. The peer review is still the same. This referencing is also very important. And look, all those frames are valid, but just the form can be not text, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's one, definitely. And that's something that I think we can push now that the tools are there, right?
Hmm.
That. The other thing I think with Compass, which is organized by Melissa in South Africa, we tried to host an open session where we invited the community members as community network experts to talk about their work, not necessarily in as a frame of research, but to kind of just talk about their vision, their work for this community network, and invite younger researchers to place themselves to see if there's a possibility of them seeing a pathway into their research, right? So this kind
Hmm.
of, so also I think the done with PDC with practice. I don't know, they have a local grassroots organizations come and talk about things. But I
Hmm.
think invariably, and this is also in response to the Kai dilemma right now that I'm facing, and a lot of us are facing, is about how it comes to the scale. Kai, if there's dialogues have been happening since a while now. Um, Kai especially, and Sikka in general, is largely dependent on a certain scale for Kai, and that makes
Hmm.
it very infeasible for many other things to do these
Hmm.
experiments. But for what happens with a conference like PDC or a Compass or a DIS, which are smaller, but they are largely also dependent on registration costs to be able to survive.
Hmm.
So and but if you want to engage communities that we work with as knowledge creators, then we need to do something about the registration costs, right? Right
Yeah.
now, there are a lot of scholarship available, but they're largely going, of course, to other, PhD scholars or student researchers, which is very valid because they also don't have access to funds.
Hmm.
So Manipal, for example, used to give us 50,000 rupees for a conference, including everything as the fund, if we get a paper published in a conference for
Hmm.
international. And this year they'll raise it to 100,000 rupees, 1 lakh. And 1 lakh covers maybe for a Kai a bit of registration cost and the stay costs, and that's about it. The flights we have
Yeah.
to, yeah. So
That too is gonna be, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So and then, which means that for a PhD scholar who often in places like India in a private university are paying the fees to do the PhD, they don't have scholarships.
Hmm.
Then that that fund, that Gary Masson fund or any other fund that's is a great thing, but then it won't cover then the community, knowledge holders to be part of this. So it's not just the form that we need to open up. Also, we'll need to rethink what does a conference mean for AcI? If you want to
Mm,
center community voices, can it be something else? Can we rethink it? I think there are interesting experiments being done in the this kind of FLOSS communities and all alternative tech communities. This DWeb is a conference that is something interesting, decentralized web, which is more, I mean, it's a bit hippie, but as I understand it, but it's again more kind of, yeah, it's a bit more frugal. So can we be more
mm,
frugal? Something, yeah, wish list.
yeah, yeah. Frugality, definitely, and very much centered on like our Indian identity, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
Indian frugality of sorts. I want to kind of wrap up with a question like that I wanted to ask right at the beginning, given that I know of your inspiring work, is like, what advice would you have for somebody, let's say, who's in college thinking unsure about what to pursue or what to do, and considering HCI as a possibility, particularly like your flavor of HCI, the place-based HCI, the community engaged HCI. What sort of advice would you have for somebody who's starting anew in this journey, and something that they like, that you feel they ought to know before they begin on this journey?
Um, I think there are a couple of things. There is a sense of romanticism attached to grassroots works, and that drove me to. There was this. I mean, when I look back, why the reason why I was driven to grassroots work is there's a sense of romanticism attached to it, especially when you're coming from a certain set of privileges in India. Like I do come from caste and gender privileges, and an access to education, which opens up to this other world out there. Though I come from a small town, but there's still this, and I've lived in villages, but there's still this other world. You're othering this, which is through media narratives for example, this idea of returning back and giving back to the community. I would say that is quite harmful, because it's it's actually, the work is quite challenging and exciting, but only when you step away from looking at it from a romantic lens or romanticizing it.
Mm,
And some of my early work also reflects in the way that I write, reflects that. So I would say, which then sets, and this is something that I tell my students too, then they get a glimpse of this work, but then they regret that they cannot sustain this because there's not much of fund or a salary for them to have a life, and they would rather go and join a corporate. And for me, that's a very valid choice.
mm,
It's an important choice because it's also about self-sustenance, and there's a certain we are part of the certain system where they have raised loans for their education and return it. But I think what would be interesting for them now that they've experienced this way of looking at intersection between technology and community and design, which is largely
mm,
HCI. And as they gain more credence in any corporate space, what could they do? Not in a very kind of giving back kind of a mentality, but in a very pragmatic way. How they can
mm,
push organizations from within, for example, or reach out in different ways and see. It's about constantly seeing possibilities for action that is not status quo. That is keep on pushing what could it be. And that's for me design. It's about always
mm,
questioning what could be, not
mm,
getting stuck into, okay, this is it. This is the frame. You see me, we have to work within this. And
mm.
that's not design. Design as an orientation is always trying to see what could be possible. And that is what I tell that to students too. See, it's like you need to always be on that mode. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I think with that we can wrap up this very inspirational conversation. I've learned a lot. I have notes that I would like to
Thank you
kind
so
of
much
share.
for being with me. Yeah.
This was amazing. I mean, like I loved all of it, every bit of it. I'm gonna reach out
Yeah,
to you to ask for resources. So the
sure.
idea that